Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've got some critical updates in regards to the Alberta secession movement that really spurred after Mark Carney won a few days ago. We're going to be discussing what are the intricate details that need to be ironed out when it comes to a secession attempt by Alberta. And based off some research I've done, it potentially could take multiple years, maybe 3, 4, 5 years, depending on how much Trump really wants to force it. It's important to note Donald Trump has not said a single thing about Alberta. We don't know if Alberta wants to be independent in their own country or if they want to join the United States or have some type of economic agreement with the United States. I think either way, we would have a better relationship with Alberta, the United States would, which would spur Donald Trump to really push for Alberta to become independent of Canada. And then after that, you talk about Saskatchewan, you talk about maybe Manitoba, British Columbia, and maybe even the territories if Trump wants the full Arctic control along with Greenland. But a big key step, this is the first step that happened yesterday. Huge win for Alberta sovereignty. Premier Smith's updated Citizen Initiative Act slashes the referendum signature required from 600K to just 177K, 10% of last election's voters. This and extends collection from 90 days to 120 days. The changes make a referendum on Alberta independence far more achievable, empowering Albertans to take control of their future. And so, yes, when it comes to them having a referendum, it looks like they've lowered the signatures required to be able to force one by a significant amount. They cut it from 600K to 177K. I think when it comes to Alberta possibly trying to succeed, you were going to get a ton of momentum and hype right at the start because the election just happened. There's a lot of very angry conservatives within Canada, within Alberta. As you can see, the blue in Canada is conservative. All of Alberta went conservative, and pretty much all of BC outside of Vancouver was conservative as well, along with a lot of Saskatchewan, the higher populated areas in Saskatchewan, and higher populated areas in Manitoba. Not saying Manitoba and Saskatchewan and BC are going to join, but it's interesting. Right now, we know that the people of Alberta are very angry. This is another election, another Liberal victory. Based off of the total seat numbers, there might be a coalition with the NDP and the Liberal Party, which would put the Conservative Party in a very tough spot. They might not get another election for another 5 years. And so this is where the secession begins. And if they do have a referendum, it's going to be very interesting to see the verbiage of the question that's asked for the referendum, because they might just say, well, do you want more autonomy in relation to Canada? And if that's what it is, there's probably going to have to be multiple referendums over several years, I would surmise, to have this happen. It's a complicated thing because from what I know, and we're going to have to get updated polling. And when we get updated polling, I'm going to share it. But the updated polling after the election, because we're going to get a heat map on the feelings within Alberta before the election. You could say it was around 35. You could maybe even argue it was 40% that wanted to leave Canada, and about 20% of those wanted to join the United States. When you're talking about the Clarity Act that was put in Canada in the year 2000 after Quebec's referendum to leave, it requires more than a simple majority, so it can't be 51 or 52%. Now, it's up for interpretation, but if it's like 55%, 56%, that doesn't mean they get to leave automatically. That would then force a negotiation within the Canadian government and Alberta in terms of them potentially staying or going. And so a negotiation would begin, and they might just reject it outright. Now, Alberta could do certain things within their own government, within their own province, to pass laws that could allow them to leave, make it at least a little bit easier. But it's a little bit more complicated than them just saying, well, we want to leave. You're going to have relations with the Canadian government. I will say, in terms of this taking multiple years, there is a wild card, and that's Donald Trump. Because of how strong the United States is, we're way more powerful than Canada. If Alberta has a referendum, and let's just say it's 60-40. So it's a large majority that want to leave. Trump can back that and say, I respect that. I want Canada to also respect that and to negotiate with them. They're going to be leaving. That's the reality. you can't ignore this referendum that was had within Alberta because the Canadian government might try and do that. You have to accept the result. They're leaving. Whether there's negotiations for certain things, we'll see. But if Trump is really aggressive about it, and this will depend, is it better for the United States? And we think it would be for Alberta to just be independent of Canada. They don't even have to join the United States. Now, if they join the United States, that's when we start talking about them. Which way are they voting? Are they conservative? I've compared them to Ohio. I've compared them to Texas. I think they'd be about a +8, +9 Republican state. There's a lot of people that disagree with that. People think that it would be a swing state at best. Even if it was a swing state, because of the amount of resources that Alberta has, and that's another reason why Canada is in their government is not going to really entertain trying to lose Alberta, especially considering where they're located as well. I mean, that's a big land loss for them, but it's the main natural resources. It's the amount of subsidies that Alberta and just Western Canada in general gives Eastern Canada to the tune of billions and billions of dollars to the far eastern provinces. So they're not going to lose them without at least a little bit of a fight. Whether or not that's really going to matter, it'll depend. If Trump really pushes for it, you might be able to force it a little bit quicker, rather than like a 4 or 5 year period where there's multiple referendums. There's an original ignorance of the secession attempt. If there's a referendum, I mean, we have to see what the referendum ends up being. That's the polls are extremely important. If it's around 60-40, then we're talking. If it's like 51-49 because of the Clarity Act, that's a simple majority. They say no, it's not. You can't leave. So it'll depend. If it's 55-45, they're going to be able to leave, or it's up for interpretation, and that's where things get a little bit weird within the Canadian government. But the point of it is there's a clear want from some people within Alberta. There's definitely a hunger to potentially leave Alberta, and I'm warning people. I'm saying the momentum is this is when the momentum is going to be the highest. We would guess, because it's right after the election. Emotions are high. Paul Viev, their candidate who was leading throughout the entirety of the last 2 years. I mean, everyone thought the Conservatives were going to win a majority, a super majority of seats, and it just didn't happen. And they ended up losing, and now there could be a coalition that ends up happening. And you can see this, not just Alberta, it's Saskatchewan, most of BC, east of Vancouver, most of rural Manitoba on board with this train. So you're seeing the divide, the east versus west. Now, would all of Western Canada potentially form their own country? That would be a logistical problem, but I guess it's possible. It seems like it would take a while to iron all of that out. But Alberta really is the first domino, and that's the point. Alberta's the first domino. They have a referendum. If the referendum is 55% vote in favor of leaving. Again, the verbiage is very important, because if they just asked for more autonomy, then that doesn't necessarily mean that's an interpretation. You need to put in a very strong, we want to leave, or they do that and then they have another referendum. So there could be multiple referendums. This is not as simple, I don't think, as just, well, you never know with Trump, but it's just saying we want to leave 55% and then Trump says we're forcing it, because Trump could really be aggressive with Alberta. Trump has not mentioned Alberta. He hasn't singled them out. It's all been the troll on the whole 51st state thing, which never made sense because of how liberal Canada is. And you would get a bunch of liberal electoral votes if you added Canada. It doesn't make sense to do it. It's over 50 electoral votes just for the entire country. And why would the country be a state? I mean, that's way too much land area for a single state. It would look weird. And the other thing is, if you add Alberta, they would be added initially as a territory. Now, you could do something to where you fast track it and allow them to be a state, but normally if they're going to apply for statehood, it takes 4 or 5 years. They'll be a territory for 4 or 5 years. And then Alberta becomes a state with about 8 or 9 electoral votes. I think they'd be conservative, but not a swing state, but more right, like an Iowa, like an Ohio. It's like an 8 to 10 point margin conservative. That would be my guess. You know, they just voted conservative by 25, 30 points. Obviously, it's more moderate. I get it. In Canada, the Conservative Party there, but still. So that's where we stand right now. And listen, we'll see if this ends up happening. You've got Rally for Alberta Independence happening May 3rd, 2025. We need approximately 400K. Well, actually, I don't think they need 400K now because they lowered the ask. But I believe they will be able to trigger a referendum. And if that happens, that doesn't mean, oh, they're gonna separate for sure. The question is, do they want to separate? If they do separate, what happens to them joining the United States? Is that on the table? Do they want to be independent of the United States? The thing with Alberta is, and people will say, well, they have no military protection. Well, really, Canada has very little military protection themselves. They can't really defend themselves. Their location is extremely advantageous. They're defended by the United States. They're defended by the Pacific Ocean. They're defended by the Arctic. They're defended by the cold weather. They're defended by the Atlantic Ocean. And I mean, they've got basically nothing to their north. So they are in an amazing spot. So for Alberta, they could say, well, we just want to be independent. We really don't need military protections. We could give them military protections the United States could in exchange for a very good trade agreement. That's something that could happen if they just wanted to be independent and form their own country. But Canada is not going to want to lose Alberta. They will probably ignore the first referendum, if I had to guess, depending on the verbiage of it. But at a certain point, that you're going to be able to enact laws within Alberta specifically that could enable for them to really push for this. And then the key would be U.S. support, because U.S. support would usurp the Canadian government and them trying to keep Alberta. It really wouldn't matter what they think if the United States says, we recognize this. They had a referendum. Their citizens want it. It's not a Greenland situation, although I think Greenland, it doesn't matter. There's 57,000 people. We should just take it over. But it's not a Greenland situation to where Greenland does not want to join the United States. Or this wouldn't even be them joining the United States. It would just be them getting independence. We would just say their citizens want it. Look at the referendum. It's 55-45. It's 60-40. It's 65-30. Whatever the margin is. I'm not saying that's what it's going to be. Before this, it was probably 35% wanted Alberta to either be independent or join the United States. I don't know if they can add another 15. They're going to add some because there's going to be a lot of people that are very angry, a lot of conservatives within Alberta that are looking at another liberal government for potentially 4 or 5 more years. You could call elections earlier in Canada, and I think with Carney and how bad his leadership should be, they will call it an election earlier, but you can understand they're very upset right now. And so this all plays into them potentially having a referendum, and maybe that 35% that wanted to leave goes to 55%. I'm not saying it will. I don't know. I mean, it's impossible to predict fully. I'm sure we're going to get polls out of it. But that would be the idea of the momentum behind the Carney victory. That's why I said if Carney won, this is how it would happen. And so you're looking at a coalition of the NDP and the Liberal Party, majority seats, like 175 total. Yeah, that's pretty bleak for the Conservative Party in Canada and in Alberta. So we'll have to see what happens in terms of this, but it would not shock me if they had I mean, I would expect at this point, considering the big news was this: updating the Citizen Initiative Act, slashing the referendum signature requirement 600K to 177K, 10% of last election's voters. Very, very easy thing for them to reach. And so if they do have a referendum, I wonder when that would be and what the result would be and what Trump's comments on that. Because now, if you're a media person worth anything, you've got to start asking, what do you think of this? Alberta trying to have a referendum, their premier lowering the required signatures, the situation with Carney winning, Alberta, their natural resources that they have potentially joining the United States or being independent of Canada. Would that be good for the United States? Does Trump want them to join the United States? Is that the only way he'd support it? So these are all questions that are going to need answers to. But guys, make sure you like this video down below. That's going to do it for this one. And also follow me on X. Link to that's in the description.